Aleph, just to give you a recap of what's going on. So we have an argument, and it's already brought up before, Rava. If I pick up an object on behalf of someone else, a Metzia that belongs to no one opinion says, Hamakbiya Metzia Chavera, Kana Chavera, yes, it's a valid kinyan because I'm doing it to benefit them. And the other school of thought says no, because you are hurting others. And this is based on another argument, whether if, let's say, Reuven is a borrower, he has many creditors, and a third party, not one of the creditors, grabs a hold some money, seizes some money on behalf of one of the creditors, whether so he's doing a schus, he's benefiting one of the creditors, but at the same time he's harming others. Is that a valid schus or not? So we had a machlekes there. The same machlekes is regarding picking up a metzia, and you're helping one person, but you're hurting others, whether it's valid or not. We had that. I'm going to come back to it right now in the Gemara. In the Mishnah, we had two cases. One case was that Reuven was sitting on a donkey. He spots something on the floor. He asks Shimon to go pick it up for him. And the first case is Shimon picks it up and he says, I picked it up. He says, I'm keeping it. And the Mishnah says that he can keep it. And there are two ways of understanding that. One way of understanding it is that he did have in mind the original person sitting on the donkey, but so therefore he can keep it if he wants to, because the guy on the donkey, he did not acquire it. The other way of learning pshat is no, that if he had in mind the person on the donkey, he would have been koine, but his argument is tchila. From the very outset, when I picked it up, I had myself in mind. I did not have you in mind. And the Sefer says the word tchila, which is redundant, so therefore they say the Reisha also says tchila. And the other one says that only the Sefer is tchila, but the Reisha is talking about, he says, I picked it up for you, but who cares? So we're up to the Gemara over here, about 10 lines at the top of the page, Yudam Aleph. Rav Nachman and Rav Chizda, the Amri Tavai, they both say, Hamakbiya Metzia Lechaveda, if you lift a Metzia for your friend, Loi Kana Chaveda, your friend is not Kaina. Now, my time, and why not? Because you're tantamount to Teifus Lebal Chayiv, Memakar Shechav Lachedim, you're grabbing on behalf of one of the creditors when there are other creditors as well. And we hold Teifus Lebal Chayiv, Memakar Shechav Lachedim, Loi Kana. If you're grabbing on behalf of others, you are not Kaina. Now, why exactly aren't you Kaina? If I'm doing something beneficial to one person, why? If he would have done it himself, it would have been all right. If one of the creditors came in and seized the money, it would have been a good seizing. So so I did it for him. Why shouldn't it be good? Because I'm harming others. So what? He would have harmed others also if he would have done it himself. So what's the difference? So the Rosh says we were given a special permission or special, allowance to have a shliach do something for you in your place, but you don't have the power to appoint a shliach when he's harming other people. The Pnei Yeshua and others say that no, this is really similar to a shliach dvar avera. Because you're harming other people, it's like a sin. And here's a shliach, you're asking a shliach to sin for you. And the rule is, ein shliach dvar avera. There's no shlichus when it comes to a sin. So that's the logic behind that. So they hold if you pick up a mitzvah for someone else, exclusively for someone else, you're not kind of. If you would have picked it up for yourself and someone else, we learned before, Rava said, because I'm zeicher for myself. So I am making a kinyan this item. And that kinyan sort of spreads out to the rest. And I can have in mind someone else as well. So I have a question. Before we go further, big machlekes Rashi and Taisus, what exactly he's talking about. And in a nutshell, Rashi says that the reason why Teifus Lebal Chayiv is like Kana, because he was never appointed to be a shliach. He did it on his own volition. In other words, what Rashi really saying here is, had you, the creditor, appointed the shliach to go and seize something from the borrower, it would have been a good seizure, even though he's harming others. Taisus and most Rishonim, they say they don't understand Rashi. The whole idea that if you go ahead and you pick up something for somebody, zuchus, is based on the concept of shlichus, that we are sure, we're confident, had you known that he was doing this on your behalf, you would have appointed him as a shliach. So how is it possible that if he did it on his own, you tell me you're harming others, it's not valid? But if I appointed him and I made him a shliach, it is valid. It doesn't make sense. And therefore they all say it makes no difference if I told him to do it, I did not tell him to do it, it's all the same. And Rashi is difficult. So the Tzas and others learn that Rashi holds that the idea of schus has nothing to do with shlichus. Schus is a gzeres hakosov based on the Gemara and Kedushin of Membeis. This is what the Torah decreed. that if somebody is zeicha on your behalf, it works. But an answer that we can give is, even if we learn that schus is shlichus, we're from Rashi in a few places it seems so, that the idea of schus is, even though I didn't appoint him, he's like my shliach. There's a difference if he did it on his own or if I appointed him. Rabbi Yosef Engel has in Beis Ha'Oitzer has a whole explanation of the concept of shlichus. He has three levels, and he tries to explain different gemaras that they're arguing. But in a nutshell, let's say there's generally two levels. One is the shliach is merely an extension of the sender, the mishalech. Shliach is the mishalech. Another one is the shliach is an independent person, but they do an act, and that act is the credit is given to the sender. So therefore, they explain Rashi like this. Rashi says, if the person is doing on his own, so he's doing a schus and he's passing it on to the creditor, because at the same time you're hurting other people, it's not really a full schus. It's a schus for one, but harming others. Therefore, this person cannot be the zeicha on behalf of the creditor when he's harming others. But if the mishalech sent the person, then you are the mishalech. You are merely an extension of the mishalech. And therefore, since the mishalech had the right to do it himself, even though he's harming others, you can do it as well. Now, what forced Rashi to make this chiddush? I'll show you in a minute what forced Rashi to make the chiddush. But let's continue the Gemara. Says the Gemara, actually, I have a question. Rabbi Nachman Metzia is Payalat. It says that we'll learn in the Gemara, an employee, if he finds something, it belongs to himself. When is that talking about? He was hired to do a specific job, and finding objects was not part of that specific job. So, for example, go and weed the field, go and plow the field, not to go find objects. If the owner said, today you work for me, didn't give him a specific job, I'll give you the jobs as the day goes on. Then it's Yushish Balabai. So this is all covered by the Balabas. It belongs to the Balabas. But what is he from here? The guy picked it up. It's as if he had a mind the Balabas, and it belongs to the Balabas. Hamagbiya Metzia Lechaverei Kana Chaverei. So how in the world can you, the Nachman of Chizah, say that like Kana? Amalei, he said back to him, Shiny Poyel the Yodekia Balabais. They came back and said, a worker who gets paid is very different than a shliach. A worker gets paid is even stronger than the highest level of shliach. In fact, the Machna Ephraim talks about maybe a goy who generally cannot be a shliach. But if you pay the goy to do it for you, perhaps it could be like a shliach. So therefore, because you pay over here, therefore it's not like a normal case, and you're harming others. This is a worker. A worker, this is me. And therefore, even I'm harming somebody else, doesn't matter. It's me. Says the Gemara, what do you mean that the worker is the balabas? The law is that a worker has the right to quit in the middle of the day. Doesn't that show that he's totally independent for the balabas? The balabas doesn't want him to quit. He needs him. An employee is allowed to quit in the middle of the day. And in fact, there's an argument in the Gemara. What happens if now he quit right in the middle of the day? You need to hire somebody else to take over. But to hire somebody for half a day, maybe it's 3/4 of a wage. Who has to cough that up? Can you deduct that from the employee who quit? Or you cannot. And according to one opinion, you cannot. So we see clearly from here that an employee is totally independent from the balabas, but has no controls over him. Says the Gemara, that has nothing to do with whether the employee is considered the balabas or not. And the Gemara explains. Says the Gemara, Amalei said to him, as long as the employee is still working and taking money, kiyad balabais, so he's mamish like the balabas. Kihadabe, so why is he allowed to quit? The time achirinu is a totally different reason. The Chsiv says, the Jewish people are my slaves. Avod daihem, they're my slaves. Loy avodim la avodim, not slaves to other slaves. And from here we learn out. So in other words, if you say that a person cannot quit and walk out from their job, that means you own him. You own his servitude, and that's avdus, and we're not allowed to do that. In fact, the halacha shel is you cannot make a contract with somebody longer than 3 years. If longer than 3 years, it becomes like an eved ivri. Some sefer based on that says an interesting thing. But some sefer says when it comes to hiring a rabbi, you have to make sort of like a contract that works two ways. As far as the members of the shul go, are concerned, it's a lifetime contract. As far as the rabbi is concerned, he has an option every 3 years to walk out, because he cannot make a contract longer than 3 years, because then he's locked in. That's like a slavery. So he has the right to walk away. but the shul does not have the right to let him go. That's what the Chassam Sefer ruled. Okay. Anyways, the Gemara continues. So Rabbi Yechon argues. Comes along. Rabbi Yechon says, in other words, you could pick up something from somebody else exclusively, and it works. Mishnah clearly says the guy picked it up, and he says to the guy sitting on the donkey, "You know what? I'm keeping it." He's allowed to keep it. Why? If he picked it up and he had in mind the guy on the donkey, doesn't that belong to him automatically, according to you? He says, "You know what? Here's different. The Amar Tanoli. What's exact words in the Mishnah? The guy on the donkey tells the guy, 'Give it to me.' He didn't say Zoiche for me, acquire it on my behalf. He said, 'Give it to me,' as if he's saying, 'I don't want it to become mine until you actually place it in my hand.' And that's very different. That's why it's like he told me, 'I don't want to be kind earlier. Otherwise, Hamakbim is kind of." Now, Tosfos and all the Rishonim ask a question here. We just said before that the basis for learning whether Kona Chaver or not is predicated on the argument if somebody is Tosfos on behalf of Baal Chayv, whether the Baal Chayv was Kain or not. If you hold the Baal Chayv was Kain, even though you're harming others, the same thing applies to Metzia. If you hold the Baal Chayv is not Kain because you're harming others, then by Metzia also you cannot pick it up and have in mind only the only other person. It's another thing if you have in mind yourself and your other person. Because then we say, Migoy de Zoch Nafsh, Zoch no Chaver. So Tosfos asks, this very Rabbi Yechon, who says by Metzia Kaina, says by Baal Chayv you're not Kaina. How do you explain that? How do you reconcile those two? So Tosfos, therefore, over here, gives a very simple answer that he says, really Tosfos loy Kana. You know why by Metzia Kaina? Because since I have the potential, if I wanted to keep the Metzia myself, I could have. Me goy to the Zocher Nafshi, even though I don't want to keep it, but if I wanted to, I could have. Is me goy to Zocher Nafshi, because I have the potential to keep it, therefore I have the right. That right that I have, I can pass on to somebody else. But by a Baal Chayv, I'm not one of the creditors. So I have no rights to this money. Therefore, I cannot seize it on behalf of one of the creditors, which would follow, if you follow Tosfos, what happens if it was a creditor himself who actually grabbed the money, but instead of keeping it for himself, he decided to give it to another creditor? It would be a valid seizure because since he could have kept it himself, that right that he had, he's passing on to someone else. It would work. I think that Rashi is bothered by the same question. And therefore Rashi answers very simple. You know why Tosfos about Chayv loy Kana? Because Tosfos, you went on your own, you grabbed it, nobody pointed you, you're schus, and you're harming others. It's a schus for one person, but you're harming others. That's not called a schus. But the case of Magbiya Metzia, like in our Mishnah, when it talks about Metzia, the guy sent him there. He told him, go do it for me. He made him a shliach. Because he made him a shliach to pick it up for him, then says Rashi, when you make someone a shliach, even though you're harming others, it is effective. It would work. And the only reason why in the Mishnah you can change your mind is because he says from the beginning, I didn't have you in mind. So Rashi is bothered the same question, why should Metzia be different than Tosfos? And he says the difference is not Metzia or Chay, the difference is whether you appointed a shliach or you didn't. There's a third possible answer, very briefly. The question is when you take the money and you're hurting all the other creditors because who said they'll ever get paid? But when it comes to a Metzia, how do we understand something that has no owner? There's two ways of understanding it. Either it belongs to no one or belongs to everyone. So therefore, if you learn that a Metzia belongs to no one, and I take this Metzia and have in mind somebody else, who am I harming? No one has any rights to it. I'm not harming anybody. So that, in fact, that's the argument. If you hold that Metzia belongs to everybody, so when I'm giving it to one person exclusively, I'm hurting everybody else. That's just like Tosfos L'Baal Chayv, and you're hurting all these other people. But if you learn that a Metzia belongs to no one, then when I take it and I give it to somebody, I'm not hurting anybody. That's the basis of the argument. Okay, next Mishnah. You saw an object, and you fell down on it. I came along another guy in the heavens, but you fell down on it. So it's not a kinyan. What kind of kinyan is falling down on it? But that's what you did. So you landed on it. I came along another person, the hechziba, and grabbed it. The second person gets to keep it because you did not make a kinyan. Even though we had a concept in Gemara Kedushin, if you see somebody searching, trying to negotiate to buy something, and you shouldn't just try to gazump him because it's an evil trait. So it's Tosfos, but you cannot say that when it comes to a lost object because you can't tell the guy go buy it, go find it somewhere else. Where else is he going to find it? Rashi and the Gemara Kedusha has a different view of this, but that's what Taisa says. Okay, so the Gemara says. So right now we're saying there's no kinyan whatsoever when you fall down on it. So l'chayda, we have a little problem because we did learn there is a kinyan that's involved there, and why doesn't it work? Shlakish said, that a person has 4 amas wherever you are, it is kaina. My time of why? In other words, the rabbis decided that where you're standing, it's a big argument if you're walking, do you still have 4 amas or just when you're standing still? But if you're standing still and you have 4 amas around you, is yours. So if you can put your things there, and if something falls there, it's yours. And why did Rabbanan say that? The king of Rabbanan say we don't want people to have arguments who owns it and anything else. Whoever's there, the 4 amas, that's who it is. Whoever's there first. Okay, so that's the 4 amas. So the obvious question is, all the Rishonim ask, so why do we have a kinyan meshicha? Why do you have a kinyan to pulling the animal or lifting the animal or passing the reins? I'm standing there. It's my 4 amas. I'm kind of for 4 amas. If now 4 amas, according to most opinions, is only kinyan rabbanon, and some of these other kinyanim are perhaps a kinyan deraisa. We'll see in the Gemara Avodah Zarah, Chayris, Rabbi Yechon Shlaki. So there's arguments whether it's, and maybe that's why we need the other kinyanim because of minyan the Torah. But if you hold the all kinyan rabbanon, why do you need a kinyan if you have 4 amas? So one answer is some Rishonim hold that when does 4 amas work? Only if you were there first. But if the animal was already standing there, if the vendor was already standing there and you walk over to get it, you don't have the 4 amas. It belongs to the vendor. And therefore it doesn't help. And that's why you need a kinyan meshicha. The other school of thought says it makes no difference who's there first. You want to buy it, you're there now, we can give it to you. But the reason why we need kinyanim is what happens, there's no room for you. You're not standing within the 4 amas. You're a certain distance. So therefore, you yell at the animal and make it move, or other things that make it happen, or you have a long stick and you lift the animal. And that's when you need kinyan. Otherwise, you don't really need a kinyan. In fact, the argument is based on a general understanding. How do we understand 4 amas? What did the rabbis do? Did the rabbis give you 4 amas? Is that what they did? And then anything inside there, you're kind of, because it's like in your house, it's in your courtyard. Or the rabbi said, we're not giving you the 4 amas. The land is not yours. We're saying that any object that's inside the 4 amas is yours. So if it's the land that's in the 4 amas, if you came second, somebody else was there first, or even too late, you can't get the land. But if it's the object itself, and that's what he's selling you, so therefore the object now is in your 4 amas, and therefore you will be kind of. That's the argument. Take a bit further. Achi asks a question from Peya, and we have an answer. Ask a question from Al Mishnah, and we'll answer. Let's go through both questions. Questions are very similar, principles are the same, and the answer will be exactly the same. You have the corner of your field. You took a little bit of the Peya, and then you threw it on the rest so they can keep it all. You have nothing. The Rambam goes so far. Normally, you would learn pshat. You don't get to keep the pay that's sitting on the floor because how are you clean it? But whatever you took, you took. The Rambam says, "Ein lebaklum." You have nothing. You lose. You forfeit everything because we penalize you for behaving this way, being so greedy and preventing others from taking it. Nafalev, you fell on it. Partially, you threw your talis on it. Maybe take it all away from you. So the same thing. All of these things. If you throw your talis on it, it will take away from you. Now the question is very simple. If you tell me that 4 amas are kind, why aren't you kind of the payer? Because it's in your 4 amas. Nikno the amas the day. Why aren't you kind of the payer? Says Gemara, you didn't say I want my 4 amas to be effective. Says the Gemara, who cares? The Rabbanan said 4 amas are yours. Who cares if he said you didn't say? Someone answers, Kivan the Nafa, once you fell on it, Goli Daita, you revealed to us, the nickname. By you falling on top of the talus, on top of the pay, what did you tell us? You're telling us, I want to be kind of the pay with my talus, not with 4 amas. So you canceled, since the Rabbanan's takana was to your benefit, and you're saying, I don't want it, you don't want it. So that's one answer. However, a Papa gives another answer. Kita kin Rabban Abba Amas. You know what Rabban said 4 amas? Ba'alma, besad Ba'alma. Generally out there in the streets, side streets. But besad Ba'alba, someone else's property. Like the kin Rabban, we didn't give you 4 amas. So even though we gave you a right to be there and collect, what rights did we give you? To walk on it, to pay and take the payer. But to be a chatzar, the Torah did not give you that right. Now, the argument of Papa and the previous answer Gemara is what I told you before. Papa learned that the whole idea of 4 Amos is that we give you the land itself. And then anything that, on top of that, in it is yours because it's in your courtyard. So the Papa says it's the private property. How can the Chachamim, what right do Chacham have to come and say to this person, we're going to excise a piece of land here, 4 Amos, we're going to give it to a poor person. It's private property. Therefore, he says there's no 4 Amos here. However, the other opinion, the first answering mode, who refused to answer Papa, they learn we're not giving you the 4 Amos. We're giving you the objects in the 4 Amos. And since the Torah said you're allowed to keep the payah, so the payah should be yours, whoever's there first, 4 Amos. And the only reason why it's not yours is because you told us you don't want the 4 Amos to work. How do you tell us? By throwing the talus on the payah. Okay, then Gemara continues the same question, but from our Mishnah here. Omar Moshe Yaakov in Zikin in our Mishnah Rosam to Yisrael Metzia Daf, and you fell on it. The Vach, he said, but someone came along and took it. That whoever took it can keep it. Now, the Amid, I was going to if you tell me that 4 Amos is coin, no Nikolai Amos a day, why doesn't it belong? Why doesn't this object belong to this person who fell on it, this talus, because it's in his 4 Amos? So we keep the same as before. He didn't say be coin. Said you want to be ticket Rabbanon, Kilama have if he Rabban made the corner, who cares if he said didn't say? So he answered, keeping the nafal, he fell on it, Golidaita, he revealed to us that he only wants to be kind of by falling on it and not with 4 Amos. And Avsheisha says, Kitekinu Rabbanon b'simta. You know when the Rabbanon said 4 Amos is effective on side streets. Simta is either a side street, or Simta is without a corner there where people can walk off the street and to and have a discussion, private discussion. The Ledochir Amos, it's not so crowded, so therefore you can have your own 4 Amos. Beshusa Rabbim, the Kodochir Amos, in a public place where there's so many people, like the Kinu Rabbanon. The Rabbanon didn't say you can have your 4 Amos. In fact, the whole purpose is to avoid arguments. This is going to cause so many arguments because you're standing in my 4 Amos, and I'm standing in your 4 Amos. Says the Gemara of Abachol Makom Kamar. It says everywhere. Everywhere, it sounds like everywhere, including not just a Simta. Makom Asuy Tzidish Amos. Tzidish Amos, you have these bollards, and the animals shouldn't get too close to the walls of the houses, but people would walk there. That's called a Tzidish Amos, side street. And those, you do have 4 Amos, because there's far fewer people that walk there. Talking about Abba Kohen Bardla, Shloki said something else named Abba Kohen Bardla. Now we know that a young girl has a yad because she can receive a get. The nasan says because of increases, and so you write it increases, and the nasan biyada, you place it in her hand. So she has it, and she can be divorced. If she has no father, you give the divorce to her, and she is divorced. Or she was married and divorced. Now she's if she marries again and divorces, it's all hers. It's her yad. So she has a yad. The question is, what is the logic behind a courtyard? Why does a courtyard work for you that anything that's inside your courtyard belongs to you? Is your courtyard like your hand, an extension of you, or is your courtyard like an agent, a shliach? Shliach is not part of you, but whatever they do it on your behalf. The same thing with your courtyard. So Reish Lakish Tana, even though she has a hand, ein lachatza, does not have the laws of a courtyard. Knows if you take a get and you give it to a Tana in her hand, she's divorced. You place it in her house or in the courtyard, she's not divorced. We'll soon see why. The ein la arba amas, and nor does she have 4 amas, because 4 amas is like a chatzar, and therefore she doesn't have that. He disagrees. He says for a girl, yesh la chatzar. For a boy, we'll see later whether he does or doesn't. But a girl has a chatzar. If the get falls in her house, she's divorced. And we'll see whether it also works when it comes to a metzia. And the yesh la arba amas. So what's going on? What's the argument? Rabbi Yechon holds that a chatzar is like a yad, and since she has a yad, she also has a chatzar, and therefore everything that's in the chatzar belongs to her. Kehechad is a yad, chatzar nami, like she has a hand, she has a chatzar. Umar Sabar, the other one holds, the Shlokish holds, chatzar mishum shlichus is about chatzar shlichus. So even though the Torah uses the word yad, it doesn't mean specifically yad. The kehechad, the shlichus less like chatzar nami less. Since a girl under bas mitzvah, a minor or a boy, doesn't have the capacity to appoint a shlich, so therefore they don't have a chatzar. So the Gemara asks, they're not asking the word Yoda, as Teza points out, but they're asking in logic. We learned in Kedushin, that ein shliach ledvar avera. You cannot have a shliach for a sin. Now, we know that chatzar by a ganef, if a ganef steals, or he enters his chatzar and he closes the door, he's a ganef. But in order to become a ganef, you have to acquire it. How did he acquire it? Because it's in his chatzar. Now, if a chatzar is a shliach, that means the chatzar is doing an avera. Don't we have a rule, ein shliach ledvar avera? If you learn chatzar is like your yad, so therefore you did a sin. But if you tell me a chotzer sachakol is only a shliach, an agent, and you're doing an avera, stealing, how can the chotzer act as your agent for an avera? So it must be that chotzer. How can anybody say that chotzer has anything to do with shlichus? That's the Gemara's question. Says the Gemara, anybody can say chotzer shlichus. What time you will let the brayse big yodai, ainly other yodai. All we know is that if you stole and place in your hand, gaga, your roof, chatzeda, your courtyard, kafifa, your porch. Minayin, how do you know that if you place the stolen items there, you're a ganat? But he might say ti matzim mekomak, wherever it may be. Now, he's talking about the chotzer shlichus boy. If you tell me chotzer shlichus, in came matzinu shlichus va'aveda. Here, the courtyard is acting on your behalf to help you steal. The kaimel, don't we have a rule? Ain't shlichus va'aveda. So the Gemara doesn't explain why, even though chotzer might be shlichus, but in this case, the chotzer will be an effective shlichus, even though you're stealing, it's an avera. And we had the Gemara Kedushin. What was the logic? Why ain't shlichus v'avera? Because the mishalech, the sender, can argue. Divrei harav v'divrei hatalmid divrei mishaleh. I never expected you to listen to me. Hashem, the ultimate teacher, says, don't steal. I told you to steal. You think for a minute I thought that you're going to steal? Of course I thought you didn't. So therefore I never intended for you to be a shlich. The other way of learning is it's a gzeres hakasuf. There's no logic to it whatsoever. We learn from two psukim, me'ila and tvicha. If you shech a stolen animal or you steal from chulin, from hegdish. These two are exceptions where there is a shliach, so we learn. But everywhere else, there is no shlichus. That's what the Gemara says over there. Now, what's the difference between these two reasons? We'll see right now. Abravina. Hey, Chamir, when do we say ain't shlichus v'arveda? The whole logic is that I say I never thought this person will do it because there's an avera involved. Why would he do it? Hey, for the shliach is an avera. Ava the chotzer, the labachiva, the chotzer being a shliach. There's no avera for the chotzer to be involved in stealing. Is mechayiv shulchus. So in that case, the mishalech is chayiv. So even though chotzer shlichus, but by gineva it's different because yes shlichus v'arveda, the chotzer, there's no avera for the chotzer. That's a question right away. So big unbelief. A man says to a slave or to a woman, go steal from me. They don't have to pay till they get she doesn't have to pay till she gets divorced. So therefore, it's not really the full sin. You don't get the full brunt of the avera of stealing because you don't have to really pay. Is hachin nami mechayiv shochan? So can the mishalech say, look, the mishalech, you can't say you didn't think she'll steal because for her it's a much smaller avera, let's say, than for a man. And therefore, of course, you should have thought that she was stealing. So you should have read her. No such thing. There's no difference for a man or a woman that nobody's allowed to steal. But right now she doesn't have funds to pay. But now we learned this Garsha Isha, if she's divorced, and now she has funds. When the Eved was set free, and now he has funds, have to pay. So the Gemara's first answer is that a chotzer has no avera, and therefore yesh shliach with avera. Answer number two, no, nothing to do with divrei harav and divrei tam. It's a gzeres hakosov. But the gzeres hakosov is, when do we say that shliach is the ancient avera when the shliach had a choice? But if the shliach had no choice, yesh shliach with avera. Irrelevant whether the shliach has an avera or not, but has a choice. So will have a choice. Yes, no. Chotzer has no choice. My benayu. What's the difference between these two answers? So the bottom line is a chotzer can be a shliach and can be a shliach even for avera because the chotzer has no choice or chotzer has no avera. What's the difference? Which reason we apply? The difference is ike benayu koyin the omal el Yisrael. What happens? A koyin turns to a Yisrael and says, "You know what? I want you to go ahead and find me a woman who is a geiris or a woman who's a divorcee, and I want you to marry for me." Now the Yisrael has no avera. He's allowed to marry a divorcee. He's allowed to marry a geiris, but a kohen has an avera. So in this case, if the reason is that if the shliach, I thought the shliach wouldn't do it because it's an avera for him, I can't say that in this case because the shliach could have married herself. Therefore, yes, shliach is v'avera. But if you learn is about choice, this Yisrael had a choice. He had a choice whether to go ahead or not, and he knows that it's an avera for me. He didn't have to do it. So therefore, ain't shliach is v'avera. Says the Gemara. For example, a man says to Yisrael, say, because go ahead and divorce me if I'm a divorcee, or Inami, or each a man says to the woman, actually, cotton, I want you to shave the head of my child and leave no payas. A woman doesn't have an avera not leaving payas, but a man does. So again, if it's the avera, he can't say. So then in this case, yes, it's avera. You can't say you didn't think the woman would do it. Why not? For her, it's not avera. But if it's because of choice, she had a choice. Tell me it's a choice. In that case, then the Mishalech is exempt. Hachinami is here too. Therefore, she had a choice. We're not gonna obligate. We're not gonna charge the sender. But according to the other lashon, the Amrit kol heiche the shliach la bar chiyuva. It has to do whether shliach is a bar chiyuva or not. Mechayiv shocha then shliach is chayiv. And hachinam here too. Kivin the la b'nei chiyuva because the woman has no avera cutting the payas. The Yisrael has no avera marrying a giyadis or a grusha. Is mechayiv shocha. In that case, the shliach is chayiv. Trace and all the Shem ask a very simple question. Even if the Yisrael has no Avera marrying the Geyris or marrying the divorcee, but he has an Avera called Lifnei Iver Lesitin Michshol. Don't place a stumbling block before a blind person. He's still doing an Avera. So the sender can say, I thought that he wouldn't listen to me because he's going to do Avera of Lifnei Iver. So the possibility follows. There's a big question. Chemed has a whole, elaborates a lot on this. When it says, let's say I give someone treif to eat, terrible thing, I violated this neighbor. So what Aveda did I do? Did I do the Aveda of eating treif? Because since I was complicit in that person eating treif, much more than complicit, I assisted that person eating treif. Is as if I'm involved in that person's Avera? Or is it either a separate Avera altogether? Nothing to do, it doesn't matter what the other person did. If I assisted someone doing an Avera, I am liable. Which Avera did I do? Lifnei Iver. Which Avera did that person do? They ate treif. So it goes here. This Yisrael is a lot of married Yeris. And the question is, but isn't Lifnei Iver? No. If Lifnei Iver means whatever Avera the person that you help do, you're part of it. So I as if I live with the Yeris. So what? For me, it's not an Avera. So there's no Lifnei Iver. But if you learn that Lifnei Iver is a separate Avera altogether, then you have to wonder why over here we say that there's there's no Avera involved. Yes, there is. There's Lifnei Iver. So this proves this, at least from here, it seems that Lifnei Iver means whatever Avera the person that your assistant is doing, you have a part of that Aveda, that very Aveda. So here it doesn't matter because you're Yisrael. Who cares? Okay. Very important Taisus here. Without going through the whole length, Taisus says, let's say, okay, the Yisrael went and gave Kedushin to this divorcee. Does the Kohen have to give her a divorce? Ein shlich dvar Avera. Let's say, ein shlich dvar Avera. So what happens? So the Kohen the Kohen and her are not married at all? Or do we say, what one answer takes is that if ein shlich dvar Avera means that nothing happened. And therefore the Kohen is not married to the divorcee and they move on in their lives. But the other opinion is ein shlich dvar Avera means that the Mishalech doesn't get punished, but the action still took place. And therefore the Kohen is now engaged to this Geiris. He won't get punished for it because he didn't do the Aveda, but they're engaged. He needs to give her a divorce. Okay, so let's continue. Saying about it further. But everyone agrees that Chatzar is Yad. You're telling me the Shlakish hold Chatzar is only Shlichus, and therefore a Ketana doesn't have it. But L'chayr Chatzar is Yad, because it says by get. Vatanya Yoda ain't Yoda her hand. Gaga Chatzar Vim how you know if you give it to her porch and all that. Tamalema V'Nasan Mekamla can place it anywhere. So L'chayr clearly, if we learn from the word Biyoda. So Chatzar is an extension of her hand, nothing to do with Shlich. And therefore, a girl should have a chatzar. What do you tell me that a Ketana has no chatzar? Says the Gemara. Li'inyin get kuli alma le'pliyi the chatzar. There's no question. The Torah clearly says v'nasan biyad, the place to get in her hand. So, and we learn from there that means anywhere. So anywhere that's under her dominion. So therefore, we say that the chatzar of a girl by gittin definitely comes from yad. The question is, a girl, can she be kaina a metzia? Do we say once she already established she has chatzar when it comes to get, she has a chatzar when it comes to everything else as well? Or is it limited only to get because get is really to do with iser, nothing to do with, it's not really a monetary thing. Is keep legally in your metzia. Marasav, one hold the alfin and metzia meget, you learn metzia from get, and therefore Rabbi Yechon says a Ketana has a chatzar. Marasav, another one holds lo yalfin get, that we don't learn metzia from get, and therefore everyone holds the chatzar comes from yad. But we don't learn Metzia from get because Metzia is a monetary thing, and you don't learn from halachas from get. That's one way of learning it. Yeah. And therefore, the chatzar itself can either be, it could be shlichus, and that's why a Ketana doesn't have a chatzar because she doesn't have shlichus. The boy say another way of learning is like this. Big when it comes to a girl, kuli amale pliyin, there's no question yalfina mitzima get, but her achotz is effective in every sphere. The hocha, the argument is going to a boy. The katika miflagi. Do we equate a boy to a girl or not? Masava yalfina katikana. One says you do learn, the masava lo yalfina kotana. One says you don't learn. The boy say my third way of looking at it is in fact there's no argument. Mara machada le pligi. One of them is talking about a boy, and one is talking about a girl. One is talking about a girl says that you have a chutzner, and because I get you have a chutzner, you have a chutzner everywhere else. And the one is talking about a boy says that you don't have a chutzner. Because a boy doesn't, you don't compare a boy to a girl, and therefore we're not talking about the same thing, not even arguing. Okay, we'll pause there for 2 seconds, and then we'll do tomorrow's Chedish's block. Kum learn about Gemara and Chedish other base.